Well, I want to start by thanking you both for coming on and doing this live today. I'm really excited. This is a really good topic. I feel like over the last couple of weeks, over the last couple of months, really, we've had conversations about what's been going on with COVID-19, with Black Lives Matters, all these current things that have been happening in our culture and society. And I also feel like we've, um, while we've been in really good conversation about these things, I've felt the urge to go deeper, and I've been requested by a lot of people to go deeper. And so, what we're talking about today is the divisive politics, mob mentality, all these things that we see popping up on social media and throughout our culture, and what we can do to remain conscious in what is seemingly an unconscious time. And so I thought it would be important to offer a disclaimer, and of course I'll let you two offer one too if you'd like, but what I'd like to offer is that we're not really here to debate the symptoms of what's happening, but rather to look at the underlying root causes from a perspective of genuine curiosity. And so one of the things that I'm really excited to explore with the both of you is all the finger pointing. And so I'm going to be very aware and very careful not to finger point myself during our conversation today. That being said, Amy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad that you're here with us. TJ, likewise. And did you guys want to offer anything before we get going here?
Gratitude, grateful to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. TJ,
I have no disclaimers. I'm going to just opinionate and finger point through the entire conversation. No, I'm with you, Jeremy. I think it's an important conversation, and it's an important conversation that I had been having with a lot of people individually. And we really, the three of us, when we got together and said, okay, is it time for us to really look at, have we all had enough? And, enough of the division, the finger pointing, the blaming, the divisive politics, the social unrest. Take a deep breath. And I really am very, very grateful, as Amy said, that we're going to dive into this. So here we go.
Here we go. So I thought we'd start, there isn't really any low-hanging fruit with our conversation today. I feel like everything is equally challenging. But what I wanted to start with is something I experienced the day before yesterday. Okay. And the three of us have talked about all these things a little bit in preparation for today's show. And then something really interesting happened, and I thought we could kick it off with that because I feel like it's so relevant. Okay. So I'm on Facebook the other day, and I'm on the Santa Cruz community page. And a young woman posted, she's probably, if I were to guess, just based on her profile picture, I'd say maybe 26 or 27, okay? And she posted that her and her boyfriend were moving from Redding, California to Santa Cruz, California, and that they're really excited. She said that they're looking for new restaurants to try, fun things to do, maybe things that are open during COVID, and any areas to avoid, any bad neighborhoods, or and then also said, here's my budget for what I'm looking to rent. Any help is appreciated. We can't wait to live by the beach. Okay. So that's her post. So I go into the comments because I'm going to recommend some restaurants, and there were probably 200 comments. Okay. And almost all of them were angry and mean. And the reason for that is because around her profile picture, there was a blue line, and I had to Google it because I had no idea what it meant. But apparently that is in support of the Blue Lives Matters movement. And so, it was an onslaught of these comments. And and I can't repeat a lot of what was said here because, we're live, but a lot of them were, if you can take your Blue Lives Matter and F right off. We don't want your kind here. You're not welcome in our community. And guys, I'm not kidding you. It was 200 comments like that. It was nothing but anger and hate. And then about every 20 comments, someone would chime in and say, wow, I'm really disappointed in my community. And then on that comment would be 20 more comments about how they shouldn't be there either. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, it was really difficult for me to be with because I was so angry. I felt so bad for this poor girl. She just wants to know where to eat, Yeah. She's so excited. And because of this, and so there's a lot of layers, but people went to her profile to see whether or not they were okay with her being in their community and decided that based on her beliefs, she's not welcome. Now, to me, that was so jarring and so just unsettling to me for so many reasons. I felt like crying. I was so upset. And I knew that, or I thought that there was nothing I could do about it. I wanted to go and comment like, hey, ignore all this. Here's some good restaurants, but I didn't want to get all the comments on mine either. So I thought that is a relevant example, specifically pointing towards how radical these beliefs have become, or maybe it's been this way all along, and now it's just much more broadcasted. And this mob mentality. And I, for one, had no idea what to do with that. So I thought we would start there. TJ, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think it's extremely poignant. And I want to also, before I even comment on that, just say I really appreciate that you said we're going to talk about the root causes. Because as you were talking, I was thinking about conscious recovery, right? Like, we don't look at the symptoms, which is addiction or the mental health issues. We try to get down to, or create a space to get down to, what's actually driving that addiction. And so if you look at that format or that framework and apply it to what's happening, that's my intention, because I like to set an intention for this conversation. Because as you said, we could comment on what happened on Facebook, and then doesn't that just create more opinions, right? So I appreciate that you said that. So what is at the root of this? Because we do see this divisiveness. I'm thinking about witches, being killed at some point for being different. I'm thinking about the Scarlet Letter, right? I'm thinking about these stories that have been passed down from generation to generation where there's a perceived other. The most extreme cases is the Holocaust. I like to look at the extreme cases because I think it's important that we do look at it in that way. When we as a culture create an other, then we start to separate ourselves, and then it becomes really easy to take it to the next step, the steps of violence, of ostracizing some. I was going to say ostracizing. That too, we could put our head in the sand, or we could ostracize someone, right, for a different point of view. I have some of my friends, you might even be watching right now, I have seen people post, I am blocking anyone who would vote for this candidate. I am blocking anyone who disagrees with me. I will not have this on my news feed, so I'm blocking them. Now, I understand that. I really do. I even have had those impulses myself because that is the human ego. I see you as an other. I believe I am my opinions. And by the way, I believe my opinions are right, and therefore yours are wrong. So I'm justified in blocking you, in canceling you, in calling you out. But what I want to say first out of the gate is not is that right or wrong, because that just continues the cycle, and quite frankly, the cycle of violence. When I make someone wrong, that is an act of violence, period. Now, it may not appear that way, but we can explore more. The fundamental question isn't, is it right or wrong to block someone or cancel culture or call someone out? The question is how is it working for us? Is it bringing us closer? Are we actually healing the root causes? Are we coming together to explore how we are more alike than we are different? So someone that's listening to me might say, I'm not like that, and I don't appreciate that kind of point of view. I've had people comment on some of my posts saying that's a really entitled point of view. So, okay, thank you for sharing. Let me look at that. But what we're really talking about here is how we get down to the root of the division that we're seeing. Because if we don't actually heal this, we're going to continue to perpetuate it. So simply said, would I rather be right or would I rather be free? And the next part of it that I'll save for later is, does it actually create the change we're looking for? Because people think we have to fight in order to create change, but it's never worked. It's worked temporarily, but then we go right back to the division. So I know that we're going to continue the conversation of how we can actually promote change on the planet, but not by fighting. So that's really what I'm excited about. And I so appreciate the way you open this, because I think it's really important.
Awesome. Thank you, TJ. What about you, Amy? Do you have any reflections on that?
Agree with everything TJ said. And I was talking to somebody who said, are you guys going to talk about opinions? And I said, similar to what you're saying, TJ, well, we all have opinions, but I like to remember we are not our opinions. And that's always very helpful for me to stay in this place of remembering that we are divine beings expressing, and how do we want to express that and show up in the world? And when you were telling your story about this Facebook post, and I don't know why, but it's easy for people behind the keyboard, right, to say a lot, as opposed to in your face. Sometimes it's different. But I was thinking about this. Well, for one, we're never upset for the reasons that we think we are. A Course in Miracles says that. And so, of course, getting right to the root, digging deeper, what is actually going on with me, with them, versus what's wrong with them or what's wrong with me. It's what's going on is really the question that helps us get deeper. And I like to go there. And so we want to dig deep. And I think it's also important to kind of understand some of what's going on as well. And so when you were telling the story, I was thinking about confirmation bias, and that's going on a lot right now. And I just watched The Social Dilemma, and they talked about this a bit. And so we can name all the ways we see division and separation and strife and the us versus them and the right, wrong, good, bad right now. We can turn on any news station and find all that, right? And so if whether we believe like we wear our masks outside and they're saving our lives or they're pointless, we can get information, support, people to confirm that. So that's confirmation bias. So in that situation, the people who are making an assumption based on her, logo on her Facebook page, she's this type of a person. It's just this blanket judgment going out about people, groups of people right now. And I think it's important for us to stay aware of why we might be in this place that we're thinking the things that we're thinking. And so in The Social Dilemma, they talked about how algorithms work. And I think at some level we all kind of know. But basically when we're online, we're getting fed more and more of what we want to see, because this is how all of our social media is designed. So depending on our individual news feeds, polarization is really constructed. It's being designed for us. So it's kind of being fed to us. So I feel like when we first begin to become aware of this, we can kind of stay on top of it. We kind of go, oh, okay, is that really my thought? Do I really feel that? Or is that somebody else's thought? We don't have to buy into what's being sold. We don't have to buy into or participate in the virtue shaming and the blaming and the cancel culture. I love the idea. I know you guys have talked about this at some point, but I love the idea of staying in the question, staying in curiosity and questioning everything. Just where did that thought come from? Why do I think that way? I think if we listen within, we stay listening within to whether you call that your gut feeling, your intuition, I call that divine inner wisdom, it will guide us. And so if we've had enough, we can choose. We can choose to step out of that narrative. And instead of following what the outer world's dictating, we can choose a different choice. So I know we're going to talk more. I've got a lot of ideas.
That's beautiful. That's really, you touched on something, Amy, that I think it brought a little bit of clarity to why it was, because when I saw this one post, right, and there's been hundreds over the last few months, obviously, but this one in particular, I had this very visceral feeling in my body when I was reading these comments, and it was this like deep sadness that, and I think like what you touched on that really like brought clarity to where the sadness came from is that this is a human being. She's asking where to eat, and this is what she's met with. And something that you both touched on that I really love so much is the reactions and the comments are the symptoms. And I fear that, or no, I don't fear it, but what I'm noticing is that the more we're caught up in the symptoms, the further away we get from the fact that we're human beings, that this person is a human just like me. And if you take away Facebook, and they, if say this woman walked into a networking meeting and she didn't have the logo around her face and she said, "Hey, I'm moving to Santa Cruz, what should I eat?" She probably wouldn't be met with the same hostility. And so what I'm noticing for me is that while it is really challenging for me to be with someone who has a completely opposite opinion of mine, what I've been really trying to tap into is, can I see them for who they are, not what they think? Because if we were our thoughts, like I'm positive I would have no friends, like if people could, and so it's like, how can we, because I get caught in the rip too. I'll be on Facebook and I'm like, oh, they said, okay, all right, and I get my thumbs ready and I'm ready to just, and so I'm curious, how can we bring that awareness when we're in it so thick, right? Like, let me add a little more to that for clarity. So in conscious recovery, there is a quote from Deepak Chopra about awareness. And how, a lifelong practice is just awareness of the body, of the heart, of the mind, right? And with that awareness comes growth, but it's a lifelong practice. And so how can we cultivate that awareness when the things that we're seeing and experiencing are so intense and so reactionary? TJ, what do you think?
Well, I love that. And I think there's so much to explore with both what Amy said and what you just said. And part of what we're seeing in terms of the deeper, right? So, again, we could talk about the symptoms for so long, but we build a coalition when we believe we are our opinions, right? So in other words, through confirmation bias, like Amy's saying, which is very simply, I go into a situation looking for an outcome to support my core belief or my idea about it, right? So if I believe the world is kind and loving, I'm going to see evidence of that everywhere. If I believe it's brutal and hostile, I'll see evidence of that everywhere. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, once this president is out of office, I'm going to be happy, or, this person is evil. And if we can just get rid of that person, we'll be happy. And what we're really exploring is that never really happens because there's just someone else to be angry at if I'm choosing to be angry. So, a big part of the conversation is then, okay, so am I saying just turn away from the events of the world? No. But what Jeremy's saying and what Amy was saying is really important. when I am able to do my own inner work and my own transformation, and that really simply means, can I cultivate a relationship with my divine essence, as Amy said, my divine self? And when I am able to connect with that for myself, I can start to recognize through awareness that I have opinions, but I'm not them. As a matter of fact, my opinions have changed. And I think it's interesting when politicians get called flip-floppers because they change their point of view. And I'm thinking, if I was held to what I believed when I was 20, watch out, world, because I had a very different view of the world. So being able to question and to evolve and to grow and to change my perspective, that's all part of awareness. But there's a deeper awareness, and that is an awareness of the deeper truth of who and what I am. And when I know that for me, I can begin to know that for you. And when I can know that for you, I can know that for me. And so then I can witness or observe all of my opinions, which, by the way, are plentiful. I was hoping that I would reach a place where my mind would stop. And then I heard someone once say, that's like asking the lungs to stop breathing and the heart to stop beating. It's what it does. And for whatever reason, we get programmed. And then many of us believe that it's reality, but it's not reality. It's illusion built on the programs. So someone that was born in Calcutta, India, is not going to have the same programs as me who was born in Indiana, right? So India or Indiana, but you have different programs, and I'm not going to have the same programs as either of you. When I believe I am my program, the awareness of even that is important. But for me, the even more important than that is to recognize that I create reality 100% of the time. And I'm going to tell a very short story. I was on my way to have lunch with a friend this morning, and I was getting gas. And this woman backed up, and now this is my version, she almost hit my car. So I honked my horn. And she started yelling at me, "How dare you?" And then she started making this sign. She said, "Shut up, shut up." And I hadn't said anything. All I was doing was making sure we didn't have an accident. And then her friend comes over and says, "She didn't even come close to your car." And, so there was this whole thing happening. And what I was witnessing was the perfect example of what happens. Now, from my vantage point, it may have looked closer than it was. Right? So it could have been that she didn't almost hit me, but I thought she did. And my version of reality is I was honking so we wouldn't have an accident. That seemed pretty innocent to me. Her version of the story was somehow I had there was an act of aggression, right? Which to me, it wasn't. But what we do with that is really important. See, my ego mind wants to make her wrong and me right. I only did that because, right? And so awareness is, oh, look, I'm wanting to make her wrong. Let me be aware of that. She's 100% correct because it's her point of view. And when I can lean into that, I no longer have to fight with the world, right? So I didn't need to do anything with that situation, but notice my response, notice the emotions, witness the reaction, and then not have it, right? And that is a practice that is very, very simple. But it took me about 30 years to learn how to do that because I believed that I needed to be defended, because I believed I was being attacked, because I believed I was my ego. And when I believe I am my ego, I must defend it because the ego or the mind, only the mind, needs to be right in order to feel safe. So that's not good, bad, right, wrong. That's just is what it is. So that's a perfect example because I could get out of my car and I could show her how she almost hit me and I could go into that. And my guess is it would escalate because she was, boom, she was activated, right? Instead, I can sit with that and I can recognize that she's not wrong. Her version of reality was completely different than mine. Now imagine that we start doing that, because that's my practice, right? And I say it's a practice because I haven't perfected that. It's a moment-to-moment practice. And then what I can do with that, because usually what happens is we drive away and we hold on to it. Have you ever like driven away and fantasized about everything that you could get back, revenge? I believe it was Nietzsche that said, within every resentment is the seed of revenge, right? And that's a paraphrase, but as soon as I'm angry, as soon as I have a judgment about you, I've planted a seed of revenge. I must avenge this. That's what we see on Facebook. So that group of people saw her as wrong, right? She's a Blue Lives Matter person. She is wrong. I must avenge this. I must make this right. I must make her understand that she's wrong. Perfect example of the ego. When I recognize that for what it is, I can actually find humor in it for myself. So I'm not saying, because people might be listening right now or watching and saying that I'm saying all of this is funny. But I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, what if we start to explore this instead of just being in reaction? What might happen? And the most powerful question is, what might get created if each of us were allowing ourselves to actually feel what we're experiencing and be aware that we have a choice? See, we're always choosing, but guess what? I didn't know that. I hear people saying, I don't have a choice. These people are terrible. And I'm gonna, again, it's the finger pointing. Somehow I'm gonna feel better if I deflect this.
Yeah, wow. I could not agree more. Amy, I'm curious, do you have anything resonating?
I have lots.
I figured.
Yes.
Well, there were so many things I'm trying to remember now. I don't know if my memory is keeping up. But to answer you, Jeremy, you were asking about, in the moment kind of things. And then TJ, I think you mentioned something about presidents. And I think that kind of like the savior thing outside of you, like there's going to be a savior, something's going to come save you, whether it's a president or the right law or whatever it is. And so we're reaching a lot of times outside of us when it's always really happening right here within us. And I love your story about the parking lot. I have a similar one about the post office, but what I was going to share first is, so I hosted a peace event last night because it's International Peace Day on Monday, International Day of Peace on Monday. And I love this quote. It's comes from a Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, and he said, "We often think of peace as the absence of war, that if powerful countries would reduce their weapon arsenals, we could have peace. But if we look deeply into the weapons, we see our own minds, our own prejudices, fears, and ignorance. Even if we transport all the bombs to the moon, the roots of war and the roots of bombs are still here in the hearts and minds. To work for peace is to uproot war from ourselves and from the hearts and minds of men and women." And this has always sort of remained like a call to action quote for me, because it's really about how I hold space in the world and what I decide, who I choose to show up as, what I choose to embody. And I shared also last night that I have a sign on my wall at my house, and it says, "Peace begins with me." And I said, you know what? That sign is completely meaningless, just hanging there on my wall if I don't embody that. We're all capable of violent thoughts, just as we're all capable of peaceful thoughts and acting in peaceful ways. And it's just a matter of which one grows, right? And so the one that grows is the one that we feed, we water, we cultivate, we give energy toward. And so the sign hanging there is nothing without me deciding and making the choice that that's who I want to be in the world when I show up. I love stories because stories stick. And so you guys know the story of the two dogs, the two dogs that go into a room. So one dog walks into the room, comes out all happy, wagging his tail. The other dog all first standing up, angry, growling. So the lady thinks, what's in the room that makes two dogs respond so differently? So she goes in and it's a whole room full of mirrors. And so the happy dog goes in and sees thousands of happy dogs staring back. And the angry dog, of course, goes in and sees that angry dog staring back. And this is like people. You can ask somebody and it's a beautiful day, and the other person, it's a terrible day, right? And same thing with the experience in the parking lot. She had a whole different experience about honking the horn than you did. And so really, honoring that everybody is in their own reality. And so that actually makes it really easy for me. It's not even about trying to convince somebody of my opinion or see it my way. It's just really being at peace with what is showing up right now. And my post office story was, we have the big stickers, 6 feet apart. And the lady, 2 people in front of me, turned around and realized the gentleman behind her was close to her. He was not on his sticker. So she began to really have a moment, a freak out moment. And my initial, knee-jerk reaction was like, whoa, that's a little much, right? And then I remember in that pause moment, what I'm here to be is peaceful and loving on this planet. That's my choice every single day. That's my mission. And so I know that her reaction lives in me too. That's not so foreign that I couldn't possibly freak out about. Maybe it won't be this particular thing, but that lives in me. And to have the compassion, the loving compassion, to see in what's in another is also lives within me. And I don't know, we might be off track of your question, Jeremy, because I don't remember.
No, I don't think we're off track at all. I think we're right on track because
fantastic.
What it's I love that piece came up because not a lot of times, but sometimes when I'm in an experience like that and I try and point out like, oh, well, like, let me just tap into my humanity, right? My Santa Cruz bros are like, dude, like, you can't just ignore what's happening in the world and like live on your clouds, right? Surrounded by flowers, or whatever. And, what I think with that is like, I think that oftentimes, the perspective of shared humanity can often be mistaken for complacency or ignorance or, and for me, it's like when I see stuff like the mob mentality, which I really want to get into because it scares the hell out of me, to be honest. It's just, I see just all these egos just fighting each other, right? And then I see all these human bodies, right? And I know there's something so meaningful deep down inside. And I'm like, let them have their day. Like, if we could just pause the ego mind for a moment, because I think what happens is, like there are things that happen in the world that are painful, that I think as a species should not happen because they put our continuance as a species at risk, right? Like things like the Holocaust, that should not have happened, clearly, right? And I know that what I do with information really matters. And so I'm what I'm trying to really lean into is the difference between addressing a situation for what it is in the world versus assigning something a judgment or, passing a judgment on another person. And so a good example that I heard, I don't remember where I heard it, but it's like if somebody does something mean and I label them, oh, they're an a-hole or they're selfish or they're a mean person, right? From that point forward, no matter what that person does, I'm viewing them through the lens of that judgment rather than saying, wow, that person did something that is clearly very unconscious, right? Or they're not there yet in their journey. And so it's like, obviously, like if I go to people who really strongly dislike Trump and I tell him like, hey, buddy, like he's just not conscious yet, but like he'll have his moment, that's not going to go over very well. But I think like what I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around is how can we embody a perspective that allows each other to be humans, right? And change our mind and change our opinion without passing so much judgment, right? So if, for instance, that girl from the story, if she changed her profile picture and she reposted the next day, how many people would go on and be like, oh, look who changed their picture, right? And it's like, what if she changed her mind? What if she flipped, right? What would she be met with? And so I know that there's not really a question in there, but it's just, that's what I'm recognizing. And I'm honestly like really struggling with it, because it's really hard to kind of level with people on this kind of level of consciousness and this type of conversation without it activating the, well, yeah, but, right? And so I'm wondering if you guys have feedback on what we could do about that.
Well, and so when I became a spiritual teacher, there's a common phrase, and that phrase is, our job is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So I hope what we're saying does activate something, because if I don't get activated, I never change. Right. And so it's very, very simple for me. When a wound gets touched, or I notice myself in reaction, I can have an opportunity to grow. Right. So I hope some of what we say actually is pushing buttons. We do have the ability, you have the ability to ask us questions live right now. If you're watching on the Conscious Recovery Facebook page, please ask us questions. Because here's what I'm seeing, and this is what I think you're pointing to, Jeremy. People end up being put in camps, and there really are not camps, right? So I said to someone, I don't believe everything that I hear in the media about COVID-19. And they literally said to me, oh my God, I never would have imagined you were a conspiracy theorist, right? So I immediately get put into a camp simply because I said, I'm not going to believe every single thing I hear. Well, first of all, if you believed every single thing you hear, how could your mind not explode? Because we hear contradictory things constantly. And if you turn on Fox News, you're going to get a different version than you do on CNN. That's confirmation bias. And Jeremy, you and I, our last show, we did a whole hour on confirmation bias. So no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, nor am I a virus denier if I say, I'm going to be curious about that rather than just accepting what I'm hearing. I have literally, and it's heartbreaking to me, I literally heard someone say, I have chosen to not leave my house since March 15th because I know if I go out, I might end up killing someone. Right now, let's sit with that for a moment. What is that creating, right? And so I think we've created a mindset where if you're not that, you're that. So even me saying that, someone might say, well, are you saying that's not true? That's a choice. It is a choice. But it's also sad to me because what I know about mental health and spiritual well-being is connection is really important. And someone who's living in that kind of fear, and not everyone who wears a mask is afraid, and not everyone who wears a mask is being manipulated by the media, right? So we end up polarizing. And I think the root of that, if I can be clear about something, I think the root of that is so that I can feel good about myself and that I can feel safe. So if I can, figure out which camp I belong in, and it might be where I live or who's around me. There was a study done, and I'm sure there are a lot of studies done, but this was in the 1960s, and I watched it. There were like 5 people sitting in a row, and the 5th person didn't know. He wasn't in on sort of, not the joke, but on the experiment. And they come in and they're in a line, and the person that's facilitating the experiment starts with the first person and asks a very simple question. Not quite as simple as what is 2 + 3, but something really close. And they go down the line, and the first 4 people give the wrong answer, but they agree with each other. And by the 5th person, it was a shockingly high percent, like 80% of the people were in agreement with the answer, the wrong answer, right? So look at that. And then people will say, well, the media doesn't really control my mind. And then, so why is it $15 million for a 1-minute ad in the Super Bowl, right? Or however much it is. So the truth is we are being manipulated, if you will. And I'm not in this big, like there's someone, consciously trying to manipulate us. But as we pass along stories, whether that's fear or openness and curiosity, we can build these coalitions. And then I can feel it's not really justified, but I can feel like I belong or I'm safe if I can find a group of people that agree with me. All of that is well and good, except it creates an enemy. So in the extreme cases like the Holocaust, that's confirmation bias and it wasn't Hitler that did it. There were a lot of people involved in perpetuating a story that this group of people were evil and inferior. And that story kept getting told over and over and over again. And people started to believe it. People were manipulated by that. And then they could see someone as inferior. And then it made it easy to turn away or look the other way from this horrific thing that was happening. We saw that with slavery. We see that with all of these events, genocide. So what's the solution? I'm going to leave it at that because I know we're going to talk about the solution, but I think it's also important to identify that as an issue. And as Amy said in The Social Dilemma, I think it's called, it talks about consciousness and an algorithm. What we click on, we get more of. That isn't just on social media. That happens everywhere we go. If I'm looking for a fight, I'll find a fight. It's readily available. If I'm looking for love and connection, if that's what I am, cultivating and growing, I experience more of that. And no, focusing on love and connection does not mean I'm ignoring what's happening in the world. As a matter of fact, that's the only thing that's ever going to shift that, because when I fight, then I create more violence in the world. It's very, very, very simple to me.
Amy, what do you think?
Agree. I totally agree. And I saw a couple experiments like that too that you mentioned, where somebody walked into like a waiting room, people were standing up on the buzzer and they asked,
Right.
Why are we doing it? And they say, we don't know. We're just doing it because we've been doing it. And then they all end up standing up, and it's just so interesting, isn't it? And I think that goes back to kind of our biology of being accepted in the tribe, because that was our survival, right? At one point in time. And just keeping that stuff in mind. That's what I like to do. Just keep that in mind, that this is kind of how my brain works. I work spiritually, but then I have this physical vessel that I work with too, and has brain chemistry and neuro pathways and patterns and all of that. So just being mindful about what's going on around me. And then really, I like to look at belief systems, because when we're talking about the root, so like we have a cold, and the cough and the runny nose is the symptom, but the root is much deeper, right? It's the immune system, it's other stuff at a deeper level. And so a lot of times what's happening with us is we have belief systems that we're not even necessarily aware of some of the time. I love the illustration. I heard this years ago, and I use it all the time because I love it. It's like when you're born, you're given this plot of land, and all of these other people in your life plant things in it and cultivate it for you. Your teachers, your parents, your culture, whoever, your caretakers. And at some point, you're handed the plot of land, and now it's a garden, and it might be a succulent garden or a vegetable garden, a rose garden, but you didn't get to pick what garden it was. It was just all of this stuff was planted in that garden for you. And so, of course, the plants are the beliefs, and the garden is your mind. And what happens is we stay with our garden a lot of times because it's comfortable. All the friends and family we have the same garden. They all have rose gardens, right? And so we don't even realize that it's sort of like autopilot, right? Autopilot going on running in the back of our mind. And I like to always come back to our original programming. So that's all programs that were put on top of us. And what is my original programming? My original programming is just divine beingness. That is all of our original programming. And so always means to take back. So I always like to think of it like reboot the computer, or renew or restore, take back to original programming. And I really like to think of it that way, like cleaning the slate of things that are sort of planted in there and coming back to, I'm holding the high watch at all times. I am choosing to have peaceful thoughts, like the quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, and really stepping into that and remembering that in order to create something new, that we have to open up to something new. We can't hold tight to what was and beat the drum of the old stuff. Wasn't it Einstein who said we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we had when we created them? So taking a look at what's playing, I think, is so important to this whole dialogue too about had enough, because we might be having enough of our own belief systems and thoughts, but pointing outward. So it takes a conscious, willing commitment to ask, if I'm in suffering right now, why? What's going on? Pause to listen. And so rather than living in the reaction of it's them out there, and just ask, what's with a new lens, what's going on with me?
I love that. It's a really good segue to what I wanted to bring up next, which we've kind of been circling around. And just briefly, to everybody posting questions, thank you so much. Keep them coming. We're going to get to questions here in just a few minutes, okay? But one of the things that I've really wanted to explore with you both is the mob mentality and finger pointing, right? And so, Amy, you were really giving a lot of practical actions that we can take, and the pause and the awareness and the recognition of what's inside. And what I'm curious about, I'll give you an example. So when the Black Lives Matter thing happened, I didn't change my profile picture. I didn't change it to all black, and I didn't write a post. And I'm pretty active on social media. And I had not one, but multiple people message me and say, Jeremy, what's going on with you, man? Why haven't you posted? Why didn't you change your profile picture? And it was more than 5 people. And one of them just straight up asked me, like, dude, are you racist? And so I just stood back, because that entire thing was so unsettling to me. While originally, my initial reaction was very angry that my inaction or lack of action automatically equaled this. And I saw so much of that on social media and in the news, where if you this, then you're that. If you don't this, then you're that. And that thinking, to me, is very scary. And so my response to the people that asked me about why I didn't change my profile picture, why I didn't write a post, I simply said that the work I'm going to do around this does not happen on social media. It happens here and only here. Some of them really liked that answer. Some of them really didn't. But the reality is that, to me, if I don't do this and I'm just pointing, then nothing reconciles. There's no change. And if what we're after is change, what's true for me, what I've seen, being a person on both sides, the receiving and giving, is that when I yell at somebody or tell them you need to this or you should do that, 99.9% of the time, it doesn't go well. It does not land, because, TJ, what you said so perfectly is that fighting creates more fighting, right? And if someone tells me I'm wrong, my ego is going to try like hell to prove that I'm right.
Yeah.
And so with the mob mentality, like what you both gave examples of, those studies, right, of the people standing up or answering wrong because of what everyone else is doing, it really reminds me of Lord of the Flies, right? And they're kids in that story. And what I'm curious about, and you've both kind of touched on it a little bit, is like, how can I be productive in my effort to bring calm to these stormy waters?
Well, I'm just so excited about where we're at in this conversation. And I kind of forgot to mention, Amy, synchronicity is really incredible. So last evening in our conscious recovery meeting, the person who spoke read from Conscious Recovery, and she actually read that story of the two dogs that go into the mirror. So I'm like, that's so synchronistic, right? What happens and what I see happening is profoundly simple. So I'm going to slow down and I'm going to say it. We believe that if we can change the world, we can be happy, but it's actually backwards. Until I recognize that I can be happy, I will never be part of changing the world. I only participate in the violence. Now, that may sound what someone might judge as Pollyanna. Well, okay, first of all, that's the only way we're really going to change the world. I followed the hashtag for a few minutes, confirmation bias. And I was astonished. And then I said, well, I don't know why I'm astonished, that what I was reading was people pointing out other people's confirmation bias, right? So yeah, look at that people. Those people over there have confirmation bias. And so if we look at something as sensitive as Black Lives Matter, I'm going to speak to some of my white friends who were calling people out for being racist and copying and pasting their post and saying, look how racist this person is, and putting it in social media. I'm adding to the violence of the world, period. The solution is for me to look at any way, and this is just for me, I don't know if this is true for you, just for me, my solution or my part of being healing, because there is, in my experience, a huge issue with systemic racism, but it starts with me. If I believe that tearing down a statue is going to fix this, I think I'm going to be disappointed. So I must, and again, this is just for me. I'm not saying that no one else should do that, but for me, I must start and look at what are my unconscious biases and beliefs? What was the programming, as Amy said? What was the garden that was planted? Well, I can tell you the racist seeds that my grandfather planted in my garden. And even though that felt counter to me, those seeds still got planted. So even if I'm not conscious of them, I need to explore if I have some of these biases and beliefs, and I can start to heal that. But I have to also take a look at what might be really uncomfortable for me. And I think that's what the finger pointing is about. It is much safer for me to find someone that appears to be really racist and call them out than for me to say, oh, as a white man, how have I contributed? Can I now start to really look at being uncomfortable with some of the unconscious beliefs I have from a lens of accountability, not blame, right? Because if I blame myself, blame is one of the lowest frequencies on the planet. So if I blame you or blame me, we're stuck. If I'm accountable, my friend used to say, I'm not religious. My spirituality is I am accountable. Right? I'm accountable for the way I view the world. I'm accountable for my own beliefs and biases. And I need to look at that. You know, if you look at addiction recovery, if we don't heal what's in the shadow, we're going to keep drinking and using, right? Until I heal the wounds, I'm going to keep looking for something to try to fix that or remedy that. So racism is the symptom, and it's a dramatic one. So can each of us, and this is just for me, but I'm going to invite me and anyone else who wants to give this a try, rather than finger pointing, can I say, how have I contributed to this? Regardless of my race, how have I contributed? Do I have thoughts of otherness? Where did those originate? What gets created when I believe that? How do I feel when a Black person walks in the room? Let me be aware of that. I might discover something that's really painful for me. Can I allow myself to feel that? Can I say, oh, wow, not from a place of blame, but from a place of accountability. And what I experience when I do that is I have a lot of emotion there because it's really sad to me. It was really sad for me hearing my grandfather being racist. And it's even sadder for me to say I must have absorbed some of that unconsciously. I didn't believe it. but there was something within me that bought into what I see on the media, what is being planted in my garden. It's my job now to look at those seeds. It's my job now to look at where those got planted and not so much fight against it. Amy, you and I, when I spoke at Brentwood a while back, someone commented or asked the question, well, as a gay man, don't you think those who rioted at Stonewall gave you your freedom? And so I can sit with that and I can say, it does appear that it's part of it. But in my experience, the way that really got healed is one person at a time having the courage to talk about their experience as an LGBT person, to come out to someone, to, how many times have I heard people say, well, they might have a judgment about gay people, but they'll say, well, you're different because I love you, right? So the more we're able to surround ourselves with people of differing points of view, the more we can actually grow. I remember posting some time back, spend time with someone from the opposite political party, spend someone that has some time with someone that has a different skin color than you, spend some time with someone that comes from a different socioeconomic status, and then grow from that. And my friend posted, why on earth would I want to do that? Why on earth we want to do that is we can actually heal. As Amy said so beautifully, we come into this world. Our original blueprint is love. It's openness, it's connection. That's our natural state. We've been programmed to believe we're something that we're not. That's who we are. So as we uncover and dismantle and have the willingness to be uncomfortable and look at all the beliefs, we can return to that original perfection. My friend Michael Beckwith says it this way: when I create an intimate relationship with my true nature, I break my agreements of mediocrity. Racism is mediocre, right? Otherness is mediocre. Homophobia is mediocre. Misogyny, all of it. That is a way to live that is just plain mediocre. We want to live dynamic and incredible lives, and at the root of that is love.
You're here.
Thank you. Thank you, DJ. That's it?
You said it all.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Amy, you have more. I know you do. We could do this for hours.
We could. We do.
Yes,
I
we
love
do.
it all. And so many things to dive into. I think probably the biggest thing to point out initially here is that it is always about what's going on within the wound, if you want to, the wound versus what's happening out there. And I was thinking a few weeks ago, 1 week on Instagram, I was kind of attacked. Not really, but somebody had a lot of things to say to me, calling me Californian, Antifa, something or other, lots of lovely things. And then the following week, I was told I should be careful because of my Trump supporting message. And neither week was it any, but it was, again, perception. And so it's just so interesting, Jeremy, back to your story, is that there's just this blanket judgment going about. And I really, because there's so much coming up to the surface. That's this whole time, there's so many things that are just bubbling to the surface. And I don't know that a lot of times people know what to do with that or how to lean into that. We're talking about lean into that, feel that. Not everybody knows what that is or how to do that. And so we're getting a lot of this. And so when we collectively hold space in this higher vibration, that emits out, that affects the whole. And something I was thinking about with this whole cancel culture, and if I don't agree with you, block me or unfriend me. I've also been seeing a lot of this. I'm leaving social media, at least for now or until next year or something. And so in a way, I was thinking about this the other day, in a way that's kind of like spiritual bypass. And spiritual bypass is in sidestep, not facing any, unresolved whatever's coming up. It's sort of like, and so I thought, would you say that's a little bit like distraction, like in addiction, that's a great, a brilliant strategy for coping with trauma, right? The addiction. So in a way, I thought, well, it's kind of like that. You're just kind of like, I'm not going to deal with it. Right. And so I see a lot of that happening. And perhaps that's because, there are people who don't necessarily know what to do with all this coming up. There's a lot of wounding coming up to look at. And so that's where we can really, really show up in the world, as that divine being that we were talking about. And instead of saying, TJ, like you were saying, instead of saying like, oh, how could you post that? You're, racist or whatever, like lean in and say, what's going on? What are your thoughts? I saw that happen on a thread. Same thing. Somebody said, it was Black Lives Matter. Then somebody came in with All Lives Matter. And then the group just plummeted the person who wrote that. And she was like, F you, out of here. And so I thought, oh, perhaps we could have had a conversation. And so, yeah, I'm just I'm thinking about all of what's happening and the space that we can continue to hold and notice and really come back to the pause. I have always called it practicing the pause. Come back to that moment to pause when I call any kind of activation, my divine alarm clock. I get to look and see what's going on with me. Oh, I was even keel, and then all of a sudden there was something, whether it was a sting or a whatever, it was jarring. And I get to say, oh, what's going on with me? And go deeper in and lean into that and feel what's happening. And instead of looking outside of me for something outside to fix, or they're doing it wrong, or they're making me feel this way. No, it's something that's happening with me, and going back to some of the things you touched on, TJ, initially with everything with George Floyd, the first, questions I was asking was, well, in what ways do I have my knee on somebody's neck? I think I heard somebody pose, and I thought that was brilliant, just so brilliant. Yes. In what ways is my thinking contributing to this collectively? And when we have the opportunity to do that, to me, that is exciting, because we get to be participating in changes. A lot of times the people that came up with the first crazy questions, think of like, well, I think it was Henry Ford who said, if you asked people what they wanted, they would say they wanted faster horses. They couldn't even think of, motor vehicles, right? And so that's where I like to live, in that unknown place of like, think of what we're creating by staying in this vibration, and not spiritual bypassing, not doing the sidestepping, but really feeling into what's going on and working within with that. Like Jeremy, you mentioned, so the work I'm doing is within. It doesn't necessarily have to be on social media, and some people work very well putting it on social media, and that's great for them. But honoring what works for everybody, so important to be a peacemaker on this planet.
I just want to touch on, before Jeremy, I just want to touch on the possibility of what's happening in 2020, because I see hashtag F2020, pictures of 2020 in the dumpster. But in our own evolution, in my own evolution, the shadow work, and simply said, that means I need to take a look at the crap that I put in the garden or continue to sow that were in the garden. That healing work was extremely painful, because all the unconscious beliefs, biases, and points of view had to come up for the healing. What if 2020 is the year we've been asking for? And I think I'm going to say that every time I speak and every time I'm in a show, because what if we've all been wanting this miraculous shift in consciousness? What if 2020 is the opportunity? I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it gives us an opportunity. As more and more of us raise consciousness, a lot of times what is unlike that comes up for healing. I'm not going to affirm that has to happen, but that is what often happens. And so what Amy's saying is, we're not going to bypass. She's saying, let's actually take a look at the crap, right? It's not bad or good. And I don't mean it's okay that it's happening, but it is happening. And let's not turn away from it, but let's look at it as the possibility, that what was in the shadow is coming up for healing. It's always been happening, but maybe we haven't noticed. As people have said, it's not that it's new, it's that it's being filmed, right? So it's being brought to the surface. Can we look at that as an opportunity for the highest and best healing? What if right now we're in the most transformational time that the planet has ever seen? What does that point of view create? Talk about some confirmation bias. Let's look at the possibility of the transformation. I bet you can see it everywhere. I'm going to hold that. I'm going to hold that we are in the midst of a profound spiritual awakening. And this year has not always been easy for me. Some days I'm like, okay, I get that. And some days I wake up feeling really sad and disconnected. Honor that, but also look for the transformation. Look for the possibility here.
Yeah, I love that. And something that Amy brought up really resonated with me. And that is, and kind of what you're both speaking to is like with the finger pointing and, the if this, then that, and the divisiveness and all this stuff, right? It makes me think how much our society likes to gloat about, and I'm speaking about American culture primarily, about how, there's this movement against shame, right? So like body shaming and all this stuff, it's like this thing where it's like acceptance and, we don't shame. But like I've seen more shaming the last 3 months than really my entire life combined. And it could be because like, we have social media now and we didn't before. That's entirely possible and probably part of it. But what I really like to think, the lens I like to look through with this is that if I'm in conversation with a Blue Lives Matter person, just for example, like Amy, you mentioned the thread where, the woman commented all lives matter, the mob jumped on her and then she split. To me, that's a missed opportunity. Shame and fighting and hostility and being antagonistic, like all these things create a void where there could have been growth. It's an opportunity to say, elaborate. What do you mean? Right. And usually in my experience, when people say that, they're trying to convey that like we all matter, which is true. We all matter. Everybody matters. Like I'll say that. I understand the Black Lives Matters perspective and I agree with it and respect it. I'm not trying to, don't tweet me. Okay. But what I'm curious about is how differently the conversation would have gone if somebody recognized that the person who wrote that is a person and not just a picture on a screen that's not real, right? And it's like when I have friends that have the most opposite beliefs that I do, and I'm not sitting there like, I'm not calling all my other friends to come over so we can all scream at this person, right? And so I think like for me, the shame and the fighting really just, it creates this missed opportunity for actual growth and transformation. And I love that you brought up the spiritual bypass, because I think, since the social dilemma came out, it's like everybody, well, not everybody, I don't want to say that. I see a lot of posts about people like, well, I'm out of here, and I'm curious why leaving the apps isn't enough.
Well, for me, it's the symptom, right? And as Amy said, I believe if I turn off Facebook, then I can be at peace, because it's what people's posting that's causing my discomfort, but it's 100% untrue. What is being touched is what's causing the discomfort, and what is being touched is something within me. So if I just turn off social media, I haven't done the deeper work of healing the wound. I think it's Don Miguel Ruiz, and I quote this all the time. It's not your words that hurt me, it's that you've touched a wound. And I take that a step further by saying the wound is getting touched so I can heal it, so it can be healed. To take a look at where it is that I might have a blind spot, not through the lens of bad, I'm a bad person because I have a wound. Welcome to planet Earth, right? We all have them. And if I meet someone who says they don't have a wound, I'm going to be really curious about that. I'm going to lean into that one for sure. But to look at that isn't anything good, bad, right, or wrong. But as long as I am hanging my hat on someone or something else, if I believe my happiness is based on who is president, that is the absolute definition of suffering. I can do what I can. I can energize people to vote. I can even get out there and fight against. But in the end, I'm going to guess in my lifetime, I'm going to have presidents that are the person I didn't vote for. It's probably going to happen. It's happened multiple times. I'm not saying for anyone listening to not be politically active, but what I am saying is if I hang my okayness on someone I most likely will never even meet, what does that create? And so we can move into a conversation of let's not bypass this just by turning off the TV, which, by the way, I have turned off the TV. But that could be a bypass. But right now, I also recognize that I don't want to be fed a narrative that isn't true to my heart. And that's CNN and Fox. They're both doing it, right? Because I remember someone called me a conspiracy theorist because I said the media is owned by large corporations and they make their money off ratings, and they get ratings off of perpetuating drama. And someone said, "Oh, are you a conspiracy theorist?" I don't think so. I think that's the way it works. And I'm curious about us being desensitized to it through reality TV. I think that could be a whole other show, right? Because there's so much finger pointing and blame, and that drama has become, it's adrenaline, right? We're become addicted to adrenaline. That's what this social dilemma shows us. That's what news now, with it's all flashing and there's the thing going underneath with all the bad news of the day. We become numb to how much of it is coming our way. So I understand why someone wants to turn off social media, but if I believe my leaving social media means I'm going to be happy, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. So, Amy, what do you got?
Well, I had this thought today. I raced to the podcast from the Oakland airport. I dropped my daughter off there earlier. She's flying to grandma's, so I can go to Sedona tomorrow. Yay. And I had this thought walking through the airport, because it's just like a ghost town. And we have an energy field around us. Mm-hmm. And I don't know exactly, I'm not a scientist, so don't quote me here, but I think it's 3 to 5 feet. And so we've been 6 feet apart for so long now. And so I just had this thought today, it just came in when I was at the airport. I wonder if that has to do with some of what's going on right now. I mean, this is kind of out in left field, but it's just something to explore, because I feel like we have such a disconnect from humanity. There's something going on right now that just feels so incongruent with who I know humans to be. And so I just wondered because we're typically in very close proximity with one another all the time, even if we're at the grocery store standing. I mean, we're not 6 feet apart. You're right up getting on the aisle with the next person, right? So we are sharing space. We are sharing energetic space. And I just wonder, it's just something I'm just wondering about today, if that could have something to do, because I truly believe, I don't know, one of you guys said this, if we were to get in the room and talk with anybody that we have a difference of opinion with, I believe that we could solve everything in the world, because I don't think you can look in someone's eyes and really hear them and still stay in that low vibrating space of blaming or shaming. I just don't think so. And so that's something to think. I was reading this book the other day. It's called The Tao of Thomas Aquinas, Fierce Wisdom for Hard Times. And there was this paragraph on joy. And because I love joy, I always use this phrase, like, let joy lead you, let joy follow the joy. And so this really spoke to me about fierce wisdom in hard times. It says that joy is the human's noblest act, might amaze us, because that's the title. Joy is the human's noblest act. Really? Is joy our noblest act? Why not fighting for justice or dying for a noble cause? Thomas Aquinas reminds us that even justice exists for the sake of joy. A just world is a balanced world, and is therefore conducive to joy for the many, not just for the few. Justice is not an end in itself, but joy is. To remain in joy through hardship, loss, disappointment, and struggle is no small thing. It demands a deep spiritual life, a depth of soul. Working for justice in order to share the joy renders joy more available to more people. I thought, wow, because when I say that, people always say, well, what's the difference between joy and happiness? And it's all semantics really in the end, because we make up the meaning to everything. But joy is just this trusting that there's more than meets the eye that's unfolding. The state of well-being, space grounded in spirit, or whatever you grab as your source. Joy is far-reaching, it's lasting. And to me, happiness is sort of generally like a mental or emotional response to maybe temporary external stimulation. I'm happy about this, I got this job, and so today is great. But joy is this underlying depth of knowledge of that everything that's unfolding is purposeful. It's happening in divine order. Like 2020, why does it have to be in the dumpster, right? We're just really evolving. We're really emerging into something more, something different. And so while I kind of look at happiness like the quest for something temporary, joy is this knowledge of unconditional love. And so staying in the space of joy, unconditional love during whatever is going on, I feel is a spiritual practice. That's part of the spiritual practice of staying in this space and holding this collective space. Because whenever our state of being is so dependent upon external factors, it's temporary, it's fleeting. Like you said, TJ, it's like, well, we'll get another president, we'll get somebody else will come in and annoy you or whatever. Joy is the ability to stand in that knowledge of truth of our being, no matter what's going on around us. I mean, does it mean we'll be happy and smiling all the time? Probably not. But it's a deeper sense. It's a deeper sense.
I love that. And I think I've never heard the two distinguished like that before, so I really appreciate that. That's awesome, Amy.
Just my opinion.
Yeah, I love it.
Definitions.
Oh wow, yeah. So we've got comments that other people love that too. Okay, so I'm trying to be mindful of our time, and I want to make sure we get to some of these questions. So one of them is, someone wants to know what you did do at the gas station, TJ.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I kind of touched on it, so I'll go a little more deeply. I had a reaction internally, and I noticed it, right? And then, as Amy said, it's the power of the pause. And I don't mean count to 5 till the anger goes away. That's because I love that. But then I was like, what are you going to do in those 5 seconds? Well, what I'm going to do in those 5 seconds is I'm going to feel what I'm actually feeling, and then notice. So I sat, right? I sat, and I didn't react to her externally, but I noticed I had internal, right? I had an internal tightening, right? Maybe that's just part of the fight, flight, freeze response to, this surprisingly traumatic event. And I sat with it. I felt it. What am I actually feeling? Allow myself to feel that, because I think if I can learn to just be present with it, take a breath, let the adrenaline subside, right? Because the adrenaline kicks in, right? And then I think I might have an unconditioned or an unconscious response to defend myself. So I notice that, I witness it, I allow myself to feel. That's what I did. And then I sat there. And then honestly, if you want to know, I started laughing, but then I didn't want her to see me laughing because I thought that might exacerbate it, right? Because I've tried the peace and love, and that doesn't always go well either. So I allow it to be an internal process and unplug from the event. So that's what I did. I checked in. What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I noticing physically, intellectually, emotionally? tap back down to that spiritual place, allow myself to feel it, take a deep breath, and then I did nothing.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's a good lesson for me for road rage too.
You weren't any worse off. It wasn't
Right.
like you stirred something up. You stayed in a peaceful space. I mean,
Right.
had you really gotten into that, it could be.
Well, and what I noticed is then I could drive away at peace, right? Because
Yes.
I don't know if she drove away in peace. It didn't appear to be true as she was driving away and motioning to me. I think you know what motions I got, but just letting her have that, without needing to defend it. Because I remember one time said, if I'm in a power struggle with someone, I'm in a power struggle with someone. Ooh. I'm in a power struggle, right? So I can release gently that rope and not be in the tug of war. That's always an option.
That's brilliant. Thank you, TJ. Another question here is, what is the fear that makes us label people and seek to be in a tribe?
Amy, do you want that one? I can always answer it, but
Yeah, well, it's their survival. It's our amygdala getting activated. That it's outside of our comfort zone, and so when our amygdala is activated, our prefrontal cortex kind of goes to sleep, right? And that's sort of our executive function, and we're just in survival mode. And so if somebody or something is bumping up against your belief systems, which make you comfortable, and so now it's I'm right and you're wrong. It's just the fear. It's the brain's natural reaction, and so I just like to keep that in mind, to know that this is what's happening in my brain when I go into that kind of fight flight mode. And that was great for times when we're running away from the tiger. Now we see chronic anxiety because people live in this state perpetually, and so I don't remember the whole question if that was it, but
No, I think that's perfect.
yeah, and just we're animals too, right? So if you look at animals, wolves stay in packs so they can protect each other, and that, as Amy said, at one point we really needed that, and now we might have an unconscious belief that we still need it. And it's not just how we look that creates the other, it's what we believe, right? Religions are built on that. We are the religion that has the answer. And then if it's a fringe group, we call it a cult. And if it's a widespread religion, we call it a major religion. But it's a particular set of beliefs that I'm not saying all religion does this, but it can, if we believe that we're this group of people that have the answer over here, that's what creates the other. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to be around like-minded and like-hearted people. That's why I love the spiritual communities I'm a part of. But I don't want to have that be that anyone who believes differently is either better or less than. That's what creates the challenges, and that's what creates the division and the otherness.
Yeah, it's like we shut off to hearing or listening. Our theme for this month at our center is listening. So we've really been diving into listening, and you're going to be talking about it this weekend. You're with us, right? But listening, I really believe that when we really actively listen to another, it creates an understanding, and understanding leads to compassion, hands down. So when we're activated in survival, it's just like we shut down. We're not listening. We're just surviving. So
yeah, and there's a meme that I love that said, if we were to spend time talking with each other instead of about each other, we would heal. And that, right, if that's a very simple, nice little bumper sticker, if you will. But what about practicing that? Right. And I just went through all 1,500 of my quotes. I send out a daily quote. I literally went through all 1,500 of them at this big project yesterday. And I had forgotten one. One says, spend time around people that talk about vision and ideas, not about people. And it's like, oh, I was so grateful because I looked at all the key people in my life. We talk about vision and ideas. I'm not talking about people anymore, not because I'm better than, but because it got really painful. I used to love to gossip because it made me feel better about myself. It made me feel superior, or it deflected the insecurity or the pain I might be experiencing. But at some point I realized, oh my God, this is poison. And I'm the one that's dying from the poison, literally, right? It was showing up in my physicality. It was showing up in the way that I had less energy because I was talking about people. And it was, I didn't stop talking about people because I wanted to get good. I stopped talking about people as much because it became too painful. And that became something that shifted me into like, oh, I feel so much better when I talk about ideas and visions and concepts and possibilities. So rather than talking about problems, let's talk about possibilities.
And I love that so much, TJ. And I think it's such a good way to nudge this towards closing, because it's just really interesting and coincidental that during a global pandemic, right, all we're doing is talking smack about each other on Facebook. And it's interesting to me because like we've touched on it in so many different ways already that the finger pointing, the shaming, and the blaming, the being offended, easily being offended at all, is just these wounds that we have that are getting touched, right? And so our response is to try and feel better. And so we react, respond, talk about other people, and it's like, and what's that doing to our bodies? What's that doing to our minds?
It's breaking down our immune system.
Yeah.
Right. So as Amy said, not being in the energy field of others can break down our immune system. Right. And someone might hear me and want to be in the debate about that. Right. Or, being in the energy and the frequency of fear is breaking down the immune system. Listen to Dr. Joe Dispenza if you want to explore this more fully, right? Our cells have intelligence, right? And what I say to them and the frequency that I'm holding actually has a debilitating effect or a healing effect. So sending myself love and effervescence and connection and all of the things that are not fear, right, actually build up my immune system. So well-meaning people that want us to stay indoors and put on a mask, yes, and, right? It's not this or that, this and that. There's also a downside to that because, our bodies are always bending toward the natural ability to heal. Medicine, if you will, or healthcare, which, by the way, I'm throwing out some controversial topics at the end, so maybe we can have it be part two. But we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system, right? So healthcare is creating a space for our own immune system to heal itself, right? And that's really what viruses are and different bacteria that attack the body is. It's attacking the immune system of its ability to heal. And then we medicate that. And, yes, that's treating the symptoms sometimes, but it's not really creating a space for healing. That's how conscious recovery is different as it looks at addiction. We're creating a space for someone to actually heal. I'm really grateful that I'm fired up at the end with some of these topics so that we can have a part two.
Yeah, because I'm saying, are we going to go down this path? Because I got another 2 hours.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have a part two, I think, because I definitely want to get into the COVID conversation with both of you in a big way. I think this was a really good part one. And I do really, really want to do a part two where we can kind of launch off some of the COVID stuff, because I know that that's, something that you both have really meaningful perspectives on. One of the comments on the post I just have to read because I think it's so great is he says, polarization is in the collective shadow. Yes. A call for healing and love. Polarization is a deep unconscious wound. And I could not agree more. I think that's just perfectly put.
Absolutely.
Perfectly put.
Yeah, so I just want to express my gratitude to you both and for everybody that stuck around for this conversation. And I had a quote. It's another Deepak Chopra quote, and it says, "Owning your own feelings rather than blaming them on someone else is the mark of a person who has moved from contracted to expanded awareness."
Mm-hmm.
And I have to read that over and over, because when I'm activated, and I want to just, you know. And so, anyways, yeah, again, really, really grateful. Thank you both so much, and we'll definitely come back and do part 2 and kind of launch off of the COVID stuff.
Part
For
2
sure.
coming soon.
That's
Thank
right.
you for having me. It was fun.
Thank you, Amy. Love you.
Appreciate you. We love you.
All right, bye everybody.
Good night.